but we're hearing 25,000 pieces, but we're only acting on 40 of them. What are we missing in reality? We're not even seeing 1 to 2% of reality. As beautiful as that sunrise and sunset is, we're only seeing 1 or 2% of reality.
That's Dr. Patrick Porter, and this is the Lifestylist Podcast. You are in for a treat today, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 381, Super Learning, Memory Gains, Remote Viewing, and Manifestation with Dr. Patrick Porter of BrainTap. Trust me when I say you're going to want access to the show notes in this episode, which can be found at lukestory.com/Patrick Porter. That's lukestory.com/Patrick Porter. And there you will find links to everything discussed, as well as a link to the complete written transcripts for every word spoken on the podcast you're about to hear. Now, before we get into the episode breakdown, I have an exciting announcement. I finally launched my brand new blue blocking eyewear brand called Gilded last week, about which I am so thrilled. It was a challenging experience, to say the least, launching a new product line in the middle of the insanity in which we find ourselves in the world today, but it finally got done, and you can find it at gildedbylukestory.com, where fashion meets function. Today we're talking with Dr. Patrick Porter, PhD, who's an award-winning author and speaker and the founder of BrainTap, the leader in technology-enhanced meditation. Dr. Porter pioneered the use of brainwave entrainment to improve clarity, sleep, and energy, and remains at the forefront of scientific research. He founded BrainTap with the goal of making this technology accessible to everyone. BrainTap offers over 1,000 original audio sessions in 12 languages and serves a worldwide user base with its mobile app and headset, which I've been using every day since this interview. It's pretty badass. The brilliant Dr. Porter has also been featured in the Wall Street Journal, People, Entrepreneur, Inc., and also on NBC, ABC, CBS as an expert in brain health and wellness. In addition to the aforementioned expertise, Dr. Porter is a wealth of knowledge and an inspiration in many varied realms of consciousness expansion. So I was like a kid in the candy store during this interview, venturing into a number of different topics, including but not limited to the following: how Patrick got started on his journey of brain entrainment, his experience with remote viewing, hypnosis, and kundalini yoga, the innovative work of Robert Monroe and Hemisync, how binaural beats work to entrain the brain, BrainTap's developmental evolution, and we also cover the various brain waves and the effects of encouraging the brain into various states, how to effectively stack other technologies with BrainTap, the most important differences between BrainTap and New Calm, another one of my favorites in this realm. Patrick also explains the light component in the goggles of BrainTap, and we talk about the effects of using these lights at night, as well as exploring his past research outcomes and what's next for BrainTap. And finally, we discuss micro and macro dosing various psychedelics and plant medicines and the benefits and risks involved in both. If by the end of this episode you're inspired to check out the BrainTap device and app, you can find it at lukestory.com/BrainTap. And as I said, since this interview, I've been doing the BrainTap sessions every day and deriving a ton of benefit from it. It's become both part of my recovery and manifestation routine. So again, if you want to check it out, go to lukestory.com/BrainTap. All right, let's buckle up and prepare for a quantum liftoff with the incomparable Dr. Patrick Porter. Patrick Porter, here we go, dude.
All right, let's rock.
Man, it's been a wild weekend for us. We had the mastermind with the BrainTap crew and the Modern Nirvana event. I feel like I have not stopped running the whole time since you've been here.
Yeah, our staff was talking. This was probably the most amazing 3 days. And now this is the coup de grace doing this here. So yeah, here we go.
It's a long time coming. You've been someone that's been on my list. I have a master document of people that I want to interview, and you've been on there for a number of years, and I'm just like waiting till I run into you in person so I don't have to be relegated to a computer screen to do it. So I'm really stoked to talk to you.
Yeah.
So I want to start by asking you, what's the most exciting thing going on in your life right now?
Well, right now, just that it's the era of the brain, man. I've been doing this for so many years and feeling like I was at another planet. Now it seems like I've shifted to the right planet at the right time, and people are recognizing how brain fitness and energy are so important. And it's not a bizarre When you're talking with the medical world that I am, they always think that's weird when you talk about energy and in the brain. Most people think the brain isn't something that can change. Now we know it can, and it just seems like I should have been born now, but somebody had to lay the groundwork, and luckily we were part of that team that did it. We're not the full team, but we're part of that equation.
So do you feel partly vindicated?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. So most people would have quit a long time ago, because one thing you find, if you're the first, like we were when we invented the first light and sound machine, just like the guy that goes out as a scout, you're going to have the arrows in your back, and a lot of people are going to try to tell you that's BS. And when we first started, there was no way to measure it. Now with the biohacking world, now we know we can even do it ourselves. Of course, the clinical solutions were there before the ones we can use for ourselves. But to me, it's like, I've been saying it, been feeling it, but not everybody can feel energy. So they have the experience, and they go, oh yeah, that was nice. I took a nap, or it made me stop smoking or lose weight or whatever, but I'm not going to do that the rest of my life. They don't think in terms of evolution. They think in terms of a change. Like, I want this change, but the reality is that it's a lifetime experience. It's not a one-time thing. And that's why, even like the name of your podcast, it's a lifestyle. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go do this today and that's it. I always look for things that are sustainable, that will improve the quality of my life, that something I want to do for the rest of my life. It's not like all the things I do every day, people might think I'm crazy, but the reality is that they've been tested. We can do it. And today, in our environment, it's the most wonderful time to be alive. If everything else would just leave us alone, right? So the key, I think, is that people are now knowing what intuitives actually feel. Because at first I didn't even know I was very intuitive, but now looking back at it, when you start inventing things or creating things, that's from that intuitive space. Before, I thought it was real technical and doing that, but then when you meditate and you do those kind of things, you're kind of using both hemispheres. And I've really developed my intuition over the years, and I think that's what's really doing it. And I knew inside, when you get, there's been a lot of people, especially because I come from the world of psychology. So a lot of my friends, when I first started, you're going to take us out of a job. I go, at that time, there were 5 billion people, and I said, we can't get to them all. We've got to have technology that's scalable, that, we need to change the mental awareness of a planet, because we're all focused on the wrong things, or a great number of people are still focused on all the wrong things.
Absolutely. And what got you started on the journey of brain entrainment in the first place?
Well, there was a company called the Silva Method, and it was a meditation practice. And my dad was an instructor, and he was a very gifted alcoholic. So, everything would be going great, but he would find a reason to go drink, right? He was an addict, right? And he couldn't get help. AA didn't work for him. And we now know that standing up and affirming you're an alcoholic might help some people. They have a 2% success rate. So, 2% of the people it works for. The other 98% struggle. They go back. So they need to find a lifestyle, really. They need to find a way of living. And the church elders, actually, the priest and a nun, came to the house and said, Michael, we want you to attend this relaxation seminar we have. And when he went to that seminar, they played something called the Silva sound. It's isochronic tones, but they didn't call it isochronic tones. They just said, hey, this is the Silva sound. Now, with research, we knew what it was later. He sat on the floor, and he got up, and he never drank again, because it changed his way of at that moment, he said, I'm relaxed. He thought he could only relax through the use of alcohol. And there's a really good book called Finding Your Perfect High. It's by John Marshall. And before I wrote the program for DUIs for the state of Arizona, I used a lot of his material, because it proved that most addicts aren't trying to get high. They're trying to get balanced. And that was my dad. And so my dad was smart enough to know, hey, I've got 9 kids at home. They're going to be just as screwed up as I am if I don't help them. Right. So we're only as smart as the newest information we have available to us. So my dad started teaching us. And then for years, we would help set up the chairs, be in the seminars. I've probably done the Silva seminar 1,000 times, So,
wow.
So
is that something that still carries on today?
Oh, yeah. Millions of people are doing the Silva method. Wow. My dad was fortunate when Jose was still around. He studied with him here in Laredo, Texas. That's where he started. And, one thing that I find is it's kind of like one of the principles of AA, right? Once you get help, you go help other people. And my dad thought, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And everybody thought he was crazy too. But there were a lot of struggles doing that. But my mother was a very successful beautician, and we had a 12-station beauty salon, made a lot of money. So my dad didn't have to, struggle with money. He was able to follow his new passion, which was helping people. Went back to school, got a PhD, and then
wow.
I was never going to do this, by the way. This was not going to be my career path, because when you grow up and you hear your every 4-letter word but love, and then he changes and you don't really believe it as a kid.
Yeah.
But then he said, you don't have to do what I'm doing. Well, let's do this for sports. So I actually created my very first affirmation tape that I woke up to, because I found an alarm clock that would wake up to the sound of a cassette. You could put a cassette in there. And even to this day, I recommend people don't use alarm clocks. You need to wake up to something that's pleasant, because our nervous system's listening all the time. You don't want to just shock it, or wake up at your own time. In Silva, they taught something called sleep and wake control. So once we got into that, and then there's a unique story, maybe we can get into it later, of how I found the technology. And that's really what got me onto everything we have going now. It was a series of happy coincidences that happened. And it was actually predicted by someone and a lot of people think that's weird, but I've had my first book. I was talking to Allison this weekend, and I've written a book called Shamanism in the 21st Century, because I have a series of spiritual awakenings. I tell people, you don't have to wait till your midlife to have your crisis. I had mine at 12.
I've had a few.
So, I always tell people, you don't have to have a breakdown, but you need a breakthrough. So, you're either going to universe is going to put you on track, whatever you need. And you're not always going to get what you want, but you're going to get what you need. And if you're wise enough to understand that, and it's not all, I've been knocked around, kicked around, had to struggle, but I kept that vision, and now it's expanded. It used to be I wanted to help 1 billion people. And since we've blown way past that, now it's 1 billion. I said, that wasn't big enough. If I could accomplish that in, 20 short years, we might as well go big or go home. And I think that this is a way that people are looking for solutions that are easy, that get results, and it basically helps. It's something that it doesn't have to be what we do. Obviously, they have to find a way to calm down their nervous system, find themselves, and then show up. You can't just go all the time. The American way is, let's work hard, work through it, and we're going to succeed. But then what happens is we retire and expire. They're like the salmon swimming upstream. They get their seeds. They fertilize their seeds. They get their retirement money. They got their golden parachute. Next thing you know, they're pushing up daisies. Because they didn't have the future in mind, right?
Yeah.
We got to have that future in perspective. And for me, when somebody says, "Man," because I quote, "I've already retired once," right? But I'm never going to retire. I mean, there's too many people to help, and I love what I do. I still get paid to do fun things. I still feel like I'm setting up chairs for my dad, because I love seeing people just light up, and realize that the solution's within you. And there's a lot of tools to do that. And I think binaural beats are one of them, because it's been proven, and it's been around since the 1800s. So it's not something I wish I invented it, but it's been around. And I like to tell people everything you see in the world is actually an ancient tradition that has been transformed into modern technology, because we're still playing out the same roles, the same scenarios, the same archetypes. And, who are you playing? You playing the victim, or are you playing a superhero? Because if you're playing the victim, you haven't elevated your story to get you got to get your superpower. And mine happens to be what I do. I tried to do other things, by the way. When you become successful, you think, well, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to do this other thing and that thing. And then I've realized, after failing really quick, that this is what I do. And so I just stay with it. And I'm like a dog with a bone. This is what I do, and as long as it has to do with light, sound, and vibration, I'm all in. There's a lot of other things that are good, and people can do those, and I'll support them and use them. In our clinic, we use a lot of different technologies that aren't mine, because I think you need more than just one thing.
Did any of your other 8 siblings pursue similar paths?
Oh, yeah. Michael, my brother, is still our educational director. He's been the steady one. He's what really got us into this. I should back up a little bit. My mother, we lived in Battle Creek, Michigan, which is the very first health food store in the world, was there. Dr. Kellogg was there. In 1890s, he started doing colonics, and everybody thought it was crazy. And we had a Seventh-day Adventist hospital there that was all health. You would think it would be in California somewhere, right? But it was in Battle Creek, Michigan, and it was all vegetarian, healthy foods, everything like that. So you had a choice. You could go to Lila, which was, the jabs, the sticks, the pills, or you could go over to the Seventh-day Adventist hospital and have a holistic experience. So when Michael, who's my older brother, and I write about it in one of my books, I've written 9, the one called Awaken the Genius, I talk about him that they couldn't start school till he ran laps around the classroom. And my mother went to an iridologist where they look at your eyes. And in fact, we're going to an iridology conference here at the end of the month because I still support them because of how they help my family. And they looked into each of our eyes and they told us about our health. It's like, what? This is magical. You mean so now we know that our body's a hologram. But at the time, what they told my mom was, get us off sugar, red dyes, everything we know about today that's part of the biohacking journey or experience. My mother started doing that. In fact, for those that are old enough, I was predicted to replace Yule Gibbons in the Grape Nuts commercials by my friends. In my yearbook, it says that, right? And so because I eat weird food, I brought my own food, and that was because of my brother Michael. And he still, to this day, eats very weird. That people would think it was weird, but we would say he's eating healthy, and he's 2 years older than me, and he's still physically fit, and he's in there. And then we have the rest of them do everything that we're talking about here, but they didn't do it as a profession. At one time, I had 6 siblings working for me when I had a franchise company. I used to have 108 locations around the country, and we used to have, it was called Positive Changes, and we used to help people with their personal problems, and, it was a counseling center, and we franchised it, and I sold that in 2002 to pursue other things. But
Wow. Do you struggle with brain fog and a lack of focus? Well, this is something I've worked on for years, and I've tried tons of interventions, as you can imagine. One of the first products I tried to help was Alpha Brain by Onnit. Well, I took it for a couple of years, and it definitely helped, but then I got into all sorts of other pills and powders. Some worked, some didn't. But I recently got back on board with my original nootropic, Alpha Brain, and I'm really finding it to be quite effective. But it's not just that it works, it's that I actually feel like myself when I use it. I don't get all cracked out and moody, which has been the case with some of the other very potent stimulants I've tried on the market. The state I'm always going for is being in the zone, focused and alert, but also calm. This is the flow state, and when you can hit it, it's awesome. When you're in flow, you can easily remember names and places, focus on complex tasks, think more clearly under stress, react more quickly. With Alpha Brain's incredible ingredient blends, it builds an environment in which the brain can operate on all cylinders and protects its functioning for lasting mental clarity. So I love this product, and I always keep some on hand for times when I need some extra brain power, like when I record these promos. So if you want to try some Alpha Brain, just click on the link in your show notes, or of course head to onnit.com/Luke, where you will automatically save 10% off. That's onnit.com/Luke. And what was the work you did in Arizona with the DUI program?
When I sold, when I went into practice there with Positive Changes, I had to leave. One time I was getting married, of course. And so I didn't want to work for my dad anymore. Up to that point, I was working with Dad. And so I wanted to work on my own. And I said, Dad, you can buy me out or I can buy you out, but we can't work together. Got to a point where, I didn't want to just be an employee anymore. I wanted to be the owner. So he said, I'll buy you out. So I had about 7 months to go open up a clinic, and I didn't have anything to do. And a weird story, I always tell people, you got to do what you need to do now so you can do what you want to do then. There's no sacrifice for the work. So I had savings set aside, and I wasn't making any money. I was walking my son to school, and there was a sign in the window of 7-Eleven that said they had an opening. And, I'm 24 years old, and I think, well, I'm not doing anything at night. I'll work, and I don't sleep that much, although I get really good sleep scores, but I don't sleep that much. And usually 6 hours is like sleeping in. So because I'm doing the BrainTap, I've been doing it since 1986, so never missed a day. So your nervous system stays peaked. And
What do your HRV scores look like? I know that you can't really compare apples to apples because everyone's, physiology is unique. I'm just curious though.
Usually mine is around an 80 to 85%. But if I do a session, then I can get it up to around 100.
Wow.
Right afterwards. But you're going to have, that's a halo effect. I'm 60 now. So as you age, we've got to, with the biohacking though, I found that did 2 liver cleanses before coming out here. It really boosted my scores and I learned that from a Dr. Group. He was telling me that most people have only 15% of their liver working. So I said, wow, and I had a problem when I went to the doctor. He said I had too many red blood cells. And I said, I have thick blood. So he said, this is what I need to do. So, and I will know when I get to California, because that's where I'm going next. I'll get my blood checked again and see how it worked out.
Cool.
Things like that.
So 7-Eleven.
Yeah. So 7-Eleven, I go in there and I didn't tell them I was Dr. Porter. Obviously they wouldn't hire me to work at 7-Eleven. But a weird story, I'm sitting in there and I have almost a photographic memory, a didactic memory. And so when somebody came in to buy beer at night, it was the middle of the night, guy on a bicycle. He looks like a kid. I asked him for his ID. He shows me his ID. He's old enough. I sell him the beer. The next morning, this was overnight. I only worked at night so I could work during the day on other things. And I get a call from 7-Eleven saying, hey, we need you to come into the center. We have to talk to you. And I'm like, wow, what happened? They see me eat a cookie or something? I don't know what's going on. So I walked down because it was just around the corner from where we were living. And I get in there and they show me this video of me at the counter showing this guy's doing his thing. And they said, do you remember that? And I said, yeah, because there was like only 4 people in the middle of the night. I came into 7-Eleven and they said, do you know where he went? And I said, yeah, I know exactly where he lives. They go, how do you know that? I said, I had to look at his ID. He's over there in apartment 104. And they said, really? And they went over there and they got him. He was sitting there. He had just shot a guy 2 blocks away who was the sheriff's son. And
do you remember it because of the memory you have? You're looking at the ID?
And they didn't know where he was.
Whoa.
And so they tracked him there and they went there and then that's when the guy running 7-Eleven said, who are you? And I said, I'm just Patrick Porter, whatever. And then there was a guy I was working with that actually the first publisher of my book. He heard that I was working at 7-Eleven and he thought, damn, Patrick must be really hard up for money. Something must have really happened. He's at rock bottom. So I'm filling the cooler and I hear somebody open, Dr. Porter to the cash register. And I'm like, what? And so nobody knew I was Dr. Porter, right? So I go out and he goes, what the hell are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm spending money just doing things I can make. But then when I got my first paycheck, that was my last paycheck. Because I go, what? I worked all these hours and I got what? It's not worth my time. But it was a good story. I actually got a little pin that I keep still because I answered all the right questions when they sent a secret shopper in. Jerry said to me, he goes,
That's hilarious,
he said, I've been looking for you. He says, there's a group over here, the Arizona Health Council. Vivian's looking for somebody to write a program based on AA, but isn't AA, can be accountable for second-time offenders. And they'd like a meeting with you. So when I went to meet with them, they said, wow, this is fantastic. Because I'd studied with Richard Bandler and John Grinder and Tony Robbins. Tony wasn't really a trainer at that time. I did the firewalk for $250. That'll give you how long ago that was. But when I met with Vivian, she said, if you write the program, we'll sell it. So I wrote a program. They got the request for proposal. They got $60,000 to write this program. So obviously I didn't have to work at 7-Eleven anymore. And then they let me train the PhDs and social workers to give the program. And I made $8 every time somebody took the course. So it was my first taste of reoccurring revenue, right? So that's been my history since then. I always like to say every day I make a little bit more than I did yesterday because the more people you help, the more money you make. So that got me into it. And then they used the program for about 3 years. And then, of course, something new came along. And but we always figured if you get caught once, maybe that's an accident. I don't believe that. I think the universe was already telling them, hey, you got to take a look at this issue. But when you get caught twice, driving drunk, you probably should look at that. So it was an intervention seminar. It was really it actually is the book Awaken the Genius, if people want to know what it is. I converted it to a book because I was trying to train these social workers and these psychologists because they were all stuck on diagnosis. And I said, They're not the diagnosis. The number one law of psychology states you can't be a behavior. So why are you telling these people they're alcoholics, they're whatever? They function perfectly, just not the way they want to work. The brain's doing exactly what they programmed it to do. We need to just teach them how to reprogram, and I always just tell people that I'm a software engineer for the human mind. If your brain isn't working for you, I help you write new programs. It's really what's going on. And And one day they weren't getting it. The program was actually called Hidden Solutions. And I said, I got to wake up you guys as geniuses. We were doing the training and we rolled, and I just did a little mini NLP seminar, teaching them each of the techniques. And my wife was in the back and she said, we should make this a book. And Jerry was there, the guy that became my first publisher, because he was supporting me in this thing. And he says, if you write that book, I'll publish it. And I said, Jerry, take out a napkin. You write that down right now. If I write this book, you're going to publish it. And we signed a contract right there on a napkin. I handed him the book 3 months later. He published it, and it became 1994. It was the best self-help book, voted to by a couple different exchanges, because we sold 100,000 copies in Russia. That in Greece sold a bunch of them. And of course, in America, we sold a bunch too. So
wow, that's fascinating, man. What a cool life you've had. For those listening, I want to let you know you can go to lukestory.com/BrainTap to get all the links and stuff that we're talking about. So any book you mention or anything we talk about will be at lukestory.com/BrainTap. Tell us about remote viewing.
Okay. I was fortunate. We used to have a facility that actually Michael and his family lived in Shipman, Virginia, right down the road from the Monroe Institute. So if you want to learn, I'm a big one. If I want to learn something, I'm going to go to the master. So Monroe Institute are the masters. They're the ones that got on the scene first. And so we were working with them to use their binaurals, in things like that, and with our product called the MC Square, which was the first light and sound machine. So we found, when I was going up there, I always wanted a property when you use your GPS just came out when we got it. And it used to say, you're now leaving the map network. I always wanted to be off the grid, right? You hear that all the time. And so we always make fun but we had a property there. So we got to meet Patrick Flanagan and have meetings with him all the time. And I hired someone who worked for the Monroe Institute to come work for us and teach us some things about it. So I got to sit down with them all the time.
I'm going to just interject for a second. Do you use the Patrick Flanagan Mega Hydrate, or have you ever used that product?
No.
Oh, yeah. He came up with this hydrogen product. It's like super powerful antioxidant. Very cool.
Great.
That's how I know him. And then Patrick Flanagan, he also had this little device. I don't know if you remember that thing.
The neurophone?
Yeah, the neurophone.
Yeah, we loved that.
Yeah. Was that legit? That was one of the first biohacking brain things I ever had, and I think I lost it at some point, and newer stuff came out, and I forgot about it.
We used to use it at seminars to show how we're all connected. You could but you had to use the goo, so people didn't like it, right? So we would have somebody put it on the back of their hand, and then everybody grab hands, and you couldn't hear anything. We'd take the other one to the other side of the room and put it on somebody else's hand when we're all hand. Now we could hear the message. Now the same message, the same entrainment, everyone's doing, and it's going through the bone structure. So because it was the first, what do they call that, bone conduction. But we thought that for people, if you want to get directly into the subconscious, you can bypass the neural networks that control hearing and get it right into the bones. So we used to do put in solfeggio frequencies and Nogier frequencies through that and do it with groups. 20 to 30 people. And it blew them away, because if somebody, I said, take your hand off, someone would say, this is what happens if you have a group and you're not all cohesive. You're not all in, you don't have that harmonization, that cohesion that happens. I said, we all have to be in the same frequency, the same vibration. That's a cool tool. It's still available, but you got to buy it outside the country. It's like crazy. Anything that works, they get rid of it.
So going back to the Monroe Institute, give people a little background of, how that led into, actually explain what that institute was. I think his name was Bob Monroe. Yeah. And I used to use those HemiSync tracks for years.
There's a book he has, and you probably should let him know. It's 5,000 Journeys out of the Body. And he was the first one to step up and say, hey, there's something else when you leave your physical form. What do you do? Where are you going? And they have different journeys, right? I'm not an expert at it now. They've probably progressed way beyond. We sold that property in 2002 when I sold my company, because it was also our warehouse that held all of we used to have cassettes and, CDs and things like that. But up to that point, you could go there, and it's a unique seminar. You go there, you take naps with the HemiSync, right? You all get a little bunk, but then you come and you talk about it. And the experience is, everybody has the same kind of experience. You go to the same place in the astral plane. So that got me into looking at Paul Twitchell, and that's another story. I had remind me of that one. I'll tell you, because I don't want to confuse the Bob Monroe. But if you read that book, he goes to some pretty spooky places. But that's not where you go when you go to the Monroe Institute. But he was a military guy. So I think what your mindset is, you go to the level of these other dimensions. Whatever you're vibrating at, you go to that level, right? So he would go to these warring levels.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't want to go there. I wanted to go where the spiritual beings were, and where I could feel nurtured and loved, and find that community there. And that was another, we'll talk about Paul Twitchell in a moment. But what they did was, you go to these seminars. They still are happening right now. In fact, we just had 3 talks. This is kind of good because we're bringing some of the Monroe Institute product onto BrainTap, because we've been in touch with them. They only do sound. And I said, wow, I can take those binaurals and make it bioptical. So we can get the eyes, because what we do is whatever's happening in the right ear happens in the left eye. We can do the same thing the Monroe Institute was doing, but we can activate 100% of the neural network. That's the difference between light and sound. But sound can do it. And so when they were teaching the remote viewing, they teach people how to remote view and we did this with Silva too. So everybody is like super psychic the first time. And then their conscious mind gets in the way and they start questioning it. I mean, if you grew up in my neighborhood, you're going to go to the porter's house and have an aura reading, because we'd have aura parties. We would have a sheet put up on the wall, put a candle behind it. And if you do what's called soft eyes, and Michael and I still joke, we went to the community college there because they had a bathroom that was all mirrors. And now they have little booths you sit in. But when you're in there, if you defocus, you would see all the entities that are around, all the spiritual beings, everything were around you. So if you ever had to remember, just get in the mirrors, use soft eyes, and you'll start to see things that you think you're alone. You even think you have ideas. The reality is that we don't know, because I remember sitting in business meetings and watching someone come over and whisper in the ear of this person, and they have this great idea and they think they had it. I'm going, that wasn't your idea. That was somebody helping you out. We have this whole team of people or entities or energy beings helping us out. And of course, growing up Catholic, we called them guardian angels, right? So there's different names for them. But what they do with Monroe Institute is they teach you how to tune your brain so you're balanced. And we know actually now through neuroscience that almost all problems we have in this world with our brain start with an imbalanced brain. So the hemisync would balance the brain. Once that happens, you can then eject out of your pituitary pineal region and you go on these spiritual journeys. And like people like Dick Sutphin, who's a friend of ours as well, in Sutphin Research and things, they started doing out-of-body stuff and remote viewing. But I think Patrick Flanagan was he was the main guy. And then they also were part of the Stargate program. It's part of what they did for the military that they say they stopped, but he said they haven't. They're still doing it. They just don't talk about it. But anybody...
This is where a trained soldier goes to Afghanistan remotely and goes, Bin Laden's in that cave kind of thing, right?
Yes.
I mean, I'm using just a crude example, but...
Right. What the thing is that we see only the particles of reality. We don't see the waves because they're infinite. But when you go into this whole brain state and you go into this space between what is and what isn't, I call it the quantum gap. When you get into the quantum gap, people think they're here. I remember the Maharishi and even Swami Rama did this when they were doing research with him for neurofeedback. They're doing his brain and they said, what are you looking up here for? I'm here. He's not here. I mean, but everybody thinks it's up here in your brain, right? But we have brains. Our cells are brains. Everything is energy. So it all has information. And so with remote viewing, if you get into that space and you train your brain, what happens to most people when they meditate is they shut down the frontal cortex, because this frontal lobe, because what we're taught under stress, what do? We close our eyes. If we're watching a scary movie, we close our eyes. It's just a movie. But what that does, it shuts off this capacity to think. And then we go into our limbic brain, and then we don't even have emotions, really. We're just kind of reacting to things. That we're not going to be remote viewing at that point. But if we can learn to meditate, and that's where breathwork comes in too, because they would teach some breathwork to do that, because we have to oxygenate. Our brain uses so much energy. And most people think of meditation, they go, I don't get any results from meditation. All I do is fall asleep. Well, that's because you're not meditating. You're falling asleep. You got to stay between you. And what they would do in their binaurals is try to keep you in alpha. And alpha is a timeless place that you go to. But also when you're an alpha, we now know, they didn't know this back even in 2000, that when you're an alpha, you have a gamma burst, which means you have this burst of gamma energy, just like they now know that when you're sitting in meditation with gratitude and love, you start generating these gamma brain waves that breaks down amyloid plaque and gets your brain to work better. But you also have a delta burst. And that delta burst means that your brain is now detoxing. It has to make room for this new energy. So it displaces the toxins so your brain can operate at its highest level. So the more you can stay in Silva, we called it level. In the Monroe Institute, they just called it binaural beats, but they were going to that same level. Now we also know, because nobody could go to theta, very few people. I mean, you have to be a real meditator, somebody who's really perfected it. And by the way, I've actually measured the brains of gurus in India, and some of them don't even have highly efficient brains. I mean, I would say most of them. They just, you can tell who the pretenders are and who the real people are by seeing how their brain operates.
Are some of them able to drop into theta?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of them are able to go. I mean, some of them, you say, go to this brainwave, they go there. Go to that brainwave, go there.
Oh, wow.
They don't need a brain tap to do that. They just do it. But others, it's like their brain is really hurting. They suffer the same thing that happens to everybody else, stress.
Eating too many lentils.
Yeah, probably. So in the process of what they do with Monroe Institute is they get you into the state. Once you're in the state, I tell people it's like if you're looking for the Statue of Liberty in LA, I don't care how determined you are, how motivated you are, how positive you are, you're never going to see the Statue of Liberty. You need to get to New York. So you got to get to the right state first. So they teach you to get into that state. Once you're in that state, I tell people, we can get you the state that a guru goes to. And I'll give you an example since you're into psilocybin and things like that. A study we're doing with a group in Dallas, Dr. Rosenthal, we were doing a PTSD study there. And they wanted to do it with the psilocybin. They said, what do you think about a psilocybin and BrainTap? I said, well, you might not need BrainTap if you're using a psilocybin, but let's see what happens. Because I know when you're doing a psilocybin, you're activating gamma. Because we've measured that, right? And I said, well, he said, we have some people in the study that don't want to do a psilocybin because they're addicts and they're afraid they're going to get addicted or whatever, even though that's never been kind of proven out. You don't really get addicted to it, but if they're afraid of it, they're going to, whatever they think about, they're going to bring about, right? So we said, okay. I said, give me 10 scans of the brains of people while they're on a psilocybin. So I made sessions in BrainTap. They're the gamma sessions we have. And we're getting people having a psilocybin trips digitally. So they don't have to take the drug. They just have to get into that state. Now, what they do there is up to them. Now, the awareness, now they get there, what do you do? It's kind of like if you went with me to Hawaii, I could look at the map and take you to places. But what if we went and found a Huna that knew all the places? He could take us everywhere. So we need to find somebody who's a guide who can take us to those places. So think in terms of getting into that state. A lot of people want to get there, but they don't want to have the patience or the practice to get into that state. But they think, we were just talking about this on the way over. I jokingly, I used to have a slide I would show. It was, carnation chocolate milk, but I had it changed to a little Buddha, and it said 2 scoops to instant enlightenment, instant Buddha. That's what people want. They want to get up in the morning, tear their milk, stir their, I'm Buddha. That doesn't happen. I mean, the reality is we can't be more than we are, but we can realize more than we are because our limited beliefs that we've been fed. So that's part of the mission, I think, of Monroe Institute was they were the first one on the scene. They're the big granddad that basically they didn't evolve. That's why nobody hears about them now because they thought sound. But in 86, light came about for the masses, I should say, because it's been around since 1930s, but we couldn't afford it. They didn't have a way to deploy photobiomodulation at that point. So that's when the LED chip started really coming out and doing its thing.
I want to take a moment to share with you my brand new eyewear company called Gilded by Luke Story. My goal with creating this brand was to tackle the problem of blue light and bad fashion design with one simple solution. Blue light is a color of light needed during the day, especially at sunrise, from its natural source, the sun, to release cortisol, promote alertness and focus, and to set our body's natural circadian rhythm. Artificial blue light from sources such as device screens, TVs, street lamps, city lights, and car lights is a distorted color of light with detrimental effects on our health. So taking in artificial blue light after dark tricks our bodies into thinking it's still daylight, which disrupts our circadian rhythm and prevents restorative sleep. Taking in artificial blue light during the day is disruptive to our health because it lacks the healing red and infrared light with which blue light is balanced in sunlight. And a disrupted circadian rhythm and lack of great sleep leads to a decrease in vitality and to long-term chronic health issues such as obesity, anxiety, depression, diabetes, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, heart disease, and autoimmune diseases. Exposure to artificial blue light during the day also leads to the above effects, as well as to eye strain and a decrease in energy and brain function. So by wearing gilded blue light blocking day lenses, you will block 100% of the damaging artificial blue light at 455 nanometers as measured across the light spectrum. And by wearing the gilded blue light blocking night lenses, you expand that blue light blocking coverage even further to 550 nanometers into the range of disruptive green light. What's also really cool is that gilded glasses are made by using a proprietary blend of pigments, including melanin, which is infused directly into the lenses to fully block harmful blue light. So by using the gilded glasses to block the harmful blue light during the day and night, you're going to set your body's natural circadian rhythm, which will give you the good sleep you need to wake up healthy, healed, and energized, and will also set your circadian rhythm for the next night of healthy sleep. To check out my new line of men and women's eyewear, go to gildedbylukestory.com. That's GILDED, gildedbylukestory.com. Wow, fascinating. Have you ever had any remote viewing sessions where your consciousness and awareness was definitely somewhere else and had that verified in any way?
I've never personally had it verified like that, but I have a friend that his name is Gil Gilly, and he was brought up with a guy named Ernest Holmes, if you've ever heard of Church of Religious Science, and he was one of my mentors. And we had an uncle that we couldn't get him to stop drinking. He said, just a minute. He says, go just about that fast. He says, go out to this was in Phoenix. He says, go out into the little alley behind the house, go down 3 garbage cans. His bottle is right there. Because we couldn't figure out where he was getting the alcohol from. We went down there it was. He went right there. And this guy was so unique that he could read your mind. I had a cousin that said, no way. I said, well, you come with me. You talk to Gilly. And he freaked her out. She left because everything she was thinking, he just would tell her, boom, boom, boom. And he's the guy that told me about this technology, actually. The first Light and Sound was because he told me, Patrick, you need to go to my place. He was a mentalist at the Sahara, but he was actually a doctor of natural medicine. But his side job was being a mentalist because he said everybody thinks he's something unique, but he's been tested and he's normal. Everybody else is abnormal. We're all supposed to be doing this. And he told me I would meet this woman. Her name is Linnea at the show, and she's going to teach me about this technology that's going to change the world. And I didn't even have enough money to get there. And so he gives me his black card key to the Sahara. I drive up there. I'm walking between events, and this woman stops me and says, hey, I want to show you this. You know how the people are at booths, they try to grab you. And I said, I'll be back. I want to go hear this lecture. And she says, my name's Linnea. I said, screw that. I'm over here. I said, what do you got for me? And she says, well, we have this device. It's called a SILS, Sensory Input Learning System. It was a big box, and it had 2 cassettes that would go into it. And you had to manually watch respiration, heart rate. There was only biofeedback. There was no such thing at that time as neurofeedback. That wasn't invented yet. But I laid down on the mat. She put it on me. Boom. And the most bizarre thing happened to me. I was flying through space. As real as we're sitting here. As real. I mean, it was a transparent spaceship. I was the captain. I knew everybody there. We're on our way to Earth. We can see it there. And I'm telling them, we're going to go to that planet. And we're having this long conversation with my crew. And she wakes me up. And I go, what are you doing? I said, I'm having this great hallucination, and I did some pretty neat stuff in college. So I'm thinking that this is, waking up my brain like that. She said, what do you mean? I said, I was on a spaceship. She goes, really? And I went back. I kept going back during that event and trying to recreate that experience. It never happened again. But I became involved. And this is how the universe works. And I like to tell people is if you're ready, remember I had no money. I said, I want one of those. They said, well, It's only $10,000, right? I said, $10,000? I can't afford that. But when I went back toward the end of the show, she's crying, Lene's crying, Larry's all distraught. And I said, hey, what's going on, guys? And they said, Dr. Robinson died. He's the guy who invented the sills. And I said, oh man, that's a bummer. I said, what are you guys going to do? We don't know what we're going to do. We have family in Scottsdale. We're going to go there. I said, I have an office in Scottsdale. Why don't you come use my space? I have empty rooms I'm not using. I have my undergraduate is in electronics. I said, I'll help you re-engineer this, thinking we could take a $10,000 machine and maybe I could make one and get it for free or something like that. So they brought the machine, put it in my office. I got to use it every day. Didn't have to pay for it. And one thing led to another. We're trying to recreate this device that and by the way, he didn't let anybody know how to build it, what it was involved with it. It was like sneaky. There was a guy named Dr.
So there were no blueprints or patents or anything?
Nothing.
Oh, man.
Nothing. They only made 8 of them. So it wasn't like it wasn't out there. But before they came to my office, we arranged this. Jerry, that same guy that got me into the Arizona Health Council, calls me and he says, Patrick, I got to introduce you to some people. Remember, I just met him a week and a half earlier in Vegas. I'm now in Phoenix. This is before cell phones. They're supposed to call me. They haven't called me. I haven't talked to them. I'm like, man, how am I going to get a hold of these people? It's not like today you can go on social media and track down your high school sweetheart, And so the universe, though, introduced him to Jerry. Jerry said, I'm going to bring him by your office. And her name is Linnea Reed. And I said, damn, I know her. I met her 2 weeks ago. She's supposed to be getting with me. She said, she told me that she met somebody who had a clinic in Scottsdale. She was supposed to get a hold of him, but she lost the number.
Whoa.
So the universe was going to make sure I met these people. Now, when Gilly told me that I was going to help invent this machine, I had no idea. I'm like, you crazy? What are you talking about? But when we had it, so while we're building this, I'll make it a short story. So it's in a book that actually I did with Stephen E., The Miracle Story. But what happened was we were making prototypes and we couldn't get it to work. We had to hire another engineer. I kind of oversold myself, to help us do it. I knew what I wanted to do, but the science was ahead of my experience. But that never stops me. You go find somebody who has that experience. And they built a little prototype. Everything we built, the first 2,000 were made from Radio Shack. So we made them in the back office and soldering irons, and we had an EEPROM chip maker. Those just came out, by the way, programmable chips. It was giant. It wasn't like we have today. And so what they did was I started working with people and I started to realize what the patterns were and how the brain responded. There was no neurofeedback. So we didn't know if the brain was really doing that. But what we noticed was the breathing would slow down. We could see the parasympathetic release. The sympathetic release, the parasympathetics go up. And so we're measuring this, and I created 10 different series, and we programmed that into a chip so nobody had to sit there and do it. And I said, let's test it and see what happens. I take it to my clinic. I hook it up through all my equipment. I said, you know what? I built that 10,000. I said, come over here to this room because my office was up front. I said, this is where I'm seeing people. I said, look, and I made a sills machine. They go, what do you mean? I said, I took that little prototype. I hooked it up to this cassette player, this thing. And I said, look, and they go, you made a sills machine. I said, that's right. I said, can we keep making these? They said, oh yeah, we can make those. I said, well, I have some friends we can give them to. And they said, do you think you could sell those? And I said, I would love to sell them. I said, my credit card, because I paid for the $2,000 to get all the parts from Radio Shack on my credit card. And I said, why don't you make 10 of them? I'll sell them. We'll see how people like them. I sold them within a week. Before we knew it, we're at the CS show. Fast forward 3 years, we're at the CS show getting an award for the best new gadget of the year. And this is before cell phones, before CDs, before anything. And we're like an alien. I remember we were on the front cover of the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago. It used to be there, not in Vegas. And we were on the front cover. We had a line of about 2,000 people waiting. That's why we got in the Rolling Stones were playing behind us. These people are all passed out, and we never made it. But one of the big attractors to the booth was we had Geordie LaForge's. We had like a Geordie LaForge headband saying that was going to be the future. That's what I really wanted to create, was something like you'd put on this Geordie LaForge kind of thing and go into these altered states. And that's really what started the journey.
And what about this Paul guy? You mentioned earlier, I forget the last name.
Oh, Paul Twitchell. Yeah,
Twitchell.
Yeah, he wrote a book called In My Soul, I'm Free. So one thing led to another. This was before any light and sound machines or anything like that. But I was doing my research and I should even back up a little bit further so people understand why I got on this bizarre path. In 1984, I had a bisulfite poisoning from a factory accident that I was in. And I was in the hospital, and I was getting worse. I looked like I had Parkinson's. I could not talk. I could barely walk. And I was at that Seventh-day Adventist hospital because I was vegetarian. And then somebody said I shouldn't have been there because I was probably detoxing. So it was really, but if you were sitting with me at that time, I couldn't tell you what was going on, but I could see your transfiguration. You would be changing into all the different people you've ever been while I'm sitting there. And I was freaking out. I thought I was going crazy, like wild craziness. And my sister said, she came to visit me at the hospital, and the next day they were going to do a full blood transfusion, try to figure, because there's something in my bloodstream. They figured it was the bisulfites from the metering pump that kind of blew up in my face. And it did blow up in my face, I should say, so I breathed it in, and my lungs, I had what they call chemical pneumonia. So my lungs actually sounded like Reynolds wrap. So while I'm sitting there in the hospital bed, she says, "I'm going to send my guides to heal you tonight." I'm thinking, I can't say anything. But then that night, I'm laying in bed, and I can't explain it, but there was a golden being that came into my room. And that golden being said, "Go to sleep." And before that, I could not sleep. My body was so toxic, so polluted. I would lay down, I would do everything. I just could not sleep. And so, but I freaked out when this thing came into my room. I had sleep paralysis. I couldn't move while he was in the room or she was in the room. I couldn't tell. It was a big, giant golden being. And after they left, I don't know how much time they were there. It's like a timeless thing. I ran out. This is a long time ago. There weren't phones in the room. So I had to go out to the hallway, and I called my sister. She said, "Patrick, you're talking." I could not talk before that. I just couldn't I knew what I was thinking, but I couldn't get my body to do it. And she said, "Well, what did they say?" And I said, because I told her, "Shelley, don't ever send your guides to see me. It scared the hell out of me." And she said, "Well, what did they say?" And I said, "They just said, go to sleep." She said, "Well, go to sleep." I said, "Well, I can't go to sleep. I've been trying for the last 2 weeks. They even give me the hardest narcotics to go to sleep. It wouldn't put me out." She said, "Just go to sleep. They told you to go to sleep." I went to sleep. They came in at 11:30 the next morning to wake me up to have this blood transfusion. I slept through the night, first time. And the doctor said, "Whoa, let's check his blood. Let's see what's happening." Nothing in my blood. They kept me in the hospital for over 2 months to figure out how they healed me. Now, I never told them that a golden being came in. But one thing they did tell me was I was too happy. Could you imagine that, being told by your doctor, "You're too happy"? They thought I was depressed. That's what my problem was. Now I'm too happy. I was happy to be alive. And still to this day, I wake up every morning and go, "Wow, I get to do another day here." Because I felt like I was dying, for the 3 weeks I had that pollution in my body. And they checked me out, nothing in my bloodstream. They couldn't figure it out. So they said, "We need to give you lithium." This is before they knew what lithium even did. I was one of their guinea pigs. So Michael, he brought me the book by Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics.
Oh, yeah, I love that book.
And he said, "Read this book. Don't take that damn pill." So they wanted me to take the pill. I'd put it under my tongue. They'd walk out. I'd spit it out. But the weirdest thing was, after 2 weeks, they said I leveled out my lithium. Because what I started doing was holding it in my hand, going to level, which we learned in Silva. It said, whatever this lithium's supposed to do for my brain can do it because it's just a reaction to it. That's what I learned in the book, the cycle.
Right.
So
like the happy device, the non-covalent bond molecules, right?
Yep.
Interesting.
So I started doing that for myself. And they said my lithium, they go, "We got the right amount of dose for you. We're going to monitor you for a month. And if it works," and they actually gave me a year off of my job, which I'd never go back to. It was a really polluted environment. It was a plating company that made the grills. It was really, now that I think about it, I was there to see how greed destroys our planet, because the guy didn't care. He was like killing really beautiful land in Michigan, where I was working, it was just terrible. But, he didn't care. Greed, he just wanted to make money, and create this. So then as I was doing that, I went out because I'm thinking, who is this golden being? What is this? I was brought up Catholic. I only knew that there was Jesus. And I still think Jesus was a real master, but I learned there are a lot of others. I'm like, what? I didn't learn that. Nobody, I grew up in a town that was so Catholic that I didn't even know there was another religion.
Seriously?
Seriously. I mean, after this happened, I go, there's another religion? I mean, we thought born again Christians were like, why did they leave the church? What's going on? This is weird, And now I know, I tell people I've kind of graduated, although I think all religions are good. It's the people in them that make them negative, because people are going there for some spiritual nutrients, right? But so I went on a mission. So I was reading a book. There's 2 books that actually changed my life. One was My Life Preceding 5,000 Burials by Hamid Bey. If you haven't read that one, most people know about Paramahansa, right? Paramahansa got people to his talks because Hamid Bey would put himself into a state of abeyance. He would be pronounced dead. They would bury him 5,000 times while Paramahansa gave a lecture. Then after the lecture, they would unbury Hamid Bey. They would pronounce he's dead. He'd bring himself back to life. He was a 6-ring Egyptian master. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. But he died in 1976. He actually died when he came over, because he was trained. Actually, in the book, he'll tell you he was picked out of all the kids in Egypt, because they knew in the future there was going to be somebody, the magician Houdini was going to say he could mimic anything spiritually, right? Anything you do spiritually, he could mimic with magic, right? That was his thing. When he arrived in New York the same day that Houdini died, so they say it was an energy clash, because he prepared his whole life to come over here and challenge Houdini. Houdini couldn't do those things. Houdini was doing it with magic. Hamid Bey was doing it with spiritual nature or whatever he was doing. Mm-hmm. So I knew Paramahansa was there. So that's why I moved to Phoenix. I moved to Sedona because I saw a brochure of Sedona. I went, oh my God, that's where I'm supposed to live. This is amazing. But coming from Michigan, I drove to Sedona. It's beautiful. I went there a lot, and used to be able to camp on Bell Rock and the vortexes and that. But when I went there, I go, how do you get a job here? How do you, it's like,
I wondered the same thing recently.
I'm like, well, how do you make a living here? Yeah. So I kept going down to Phoenix, and that's when I started to research all these other kind of spiritual awakenings, and just stayed involved with the technology, because again, you want to be in that state. And for me, what helped me was going into that meditative state. So I never missed a day of doing. I still do other meditations too, even though I own the BrainTap. I do other meditations because I think you've got to keep your body tuned, and keep receptive. And so I was always looking for what's the next thing. So when people say, why is he talking about Monroe Institute or Paul Twitchell? He wrote the book, In My Soul, I'm Free. And they talked about these spiritual places. And the reason I went to him was I was doing a Jyoti meditation, which, by the way, is another reason why we do the lights in the eyes. If a Jyoti meditation, for those that haven't researched that's a candle that you look at. It's just far enough when you breathe, you kind of make it shimmer. And you look at it and you're doing this gazing. So you're getting the light in your eyes, and it's actually changing your brain frequency. We know now it's 10 hertz frequency. Fire burns at 10 hertz frequency. So,
really? Wow, that's interesting.
So when you're sitting with Allison near the fire and you're having a great time, you're both swimming in these acetylcholine and other neurotransmitters. You're in the right state to be in love, because the fire's going. So the fire adds to the environment, right? Our brain is always matching its environment. So I'm doing this Jyoti meditation. And my parents, which I moved to Phoenix first, then my parents followed me. My whole family followed me. I had to get out of Michigan because my friends, when they found out what happened to me, they would show up with a joint or with some beer or something going, because I used to own a house with 7 guys. They would rent rooms for me. First thing I did was tell them, you got to move out. That's not Patrick anymore. In fact, I was known as Pat then. When somebody says, why do you go by Patrick? I said, Pat was the guy. Pat was the guy that partied, didn't give a shit about anybody, and was just in it for himself. And, I've always had a knack for making money. I've always and now I know through numerology, it's because I'm missing an 8, but I'm an 8188. So my destiny is to make money, but I'm missing it. So my karma is to make money. It's one of those weird things when somebody tells me they can't make money, I'm going, making money is the easiest thing. That it's helping people, that's difficult, or my problem is keeping the money because I give it away and do different things with it. But in the process of doing all this, the experience with Paul Twitchell was I wanted to go to the spiritual planes. And I still remember, because I also joined Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism, because I'm thinking, I want enlightenment. I'm going to go do Buddha. This is 72, what is it, the 72 Buddha or whatever, it was Nichiren Daishonin. So you're chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Renge-kyo. And one day I'm in the chants and they go, what are you chanting for? And somebody says, I'm chanting for a car. I'm chanting for a relationship. I'm going, what? I'm in my brain, I'm going, what? You can go buy those. I'm thinking, why would you chant for those? It's like, do the work and you get the reward. I want to chant for something you don't get here. Like, I want to have, I didn't know at the time, love, I didn't know what I was missing because I never had it. I didn't have that feeling of acceptance and love. We came from a big family, but we didn't hug. We were the family that made fun of the family that hugged in church because we were Irish Catholic. You don't do that. You're tough. You don't cry. And all those kind of things. You don't show emotion, and so it took a lot to break that down. But I got out of Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism because of something that happened when I got my Gahanzan, which is, after you've done it for a certain level and you can chant all these different things, they will give you your life mission on a piece of paper that you chant the rest of your life. And I researched it, and basically I'm chanting for my crops to grow. It's basically, it's like, this isn't spiritual. What are we doing? It's crazy. But the thing that really shocked me was I actually just told this story coincidentally this morning to the staff or the team, is that because we're talking about you got to live what you preach, right? You got to be the person that you want to be. And there was 1,000 people getting their Gohanzans that day. It was an awesome ceremony. You're sitting there and the energy's up, everybody's chanting, and it's awesome. And when they were walking back, his handler, this was the monk from Japan, he stops by my booth there. Where I was sitting in the temple, and he says he wants to talk to you. So I get to go back with 6 other people and have a private meeting with him, just out of the blue. I don't know how that happened. It's one of those things the universe just brings it to you. I'm sitting there, we're having a great conversation, and the guy reaches over and smokes a cigarette, the monk. And I guess he could see my face, and so his handler said, he wants to know what's wrong. And I said, well, I can help him with that. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, if he's addicted to cigarettes, I can help him get rid of that. And he goes, he's not addicted to it. He said that when his master died, his master used to every night go out and have one cigarette and watch the sunset. Now we know nicotine's okay, right? There's some parts of nicotine, right? With the biohacking, they talk about it. But back then I'm thinking, one cigarette? Okay, that's fine. You have one cigarette, that's not going to hurt you. It's like a peace pipe or something. He's out there doing it. And hopefully he was using, the non-chemical cigarettes and things like that. And then, but he proceeded to chain smoke. And I think it was the universe telling me, you're not supposed to be a Nichiren Daishonin Buddhist. You're just supposed to go there and learn that chanting runs energy through your body. Because I would just be vibrating it. I could have easily fallen in love. I could easily go to a temple and just be there. Just let me stay there and chant and do all those things. But that's not my mission, right? I'm not supposed to just go do that. So I did that with several different disciplines, and something would always, even Paul Twitchell's stuff, and there's a lot of, you can chant the U, and I still do that. That's how you go out of the body. So it's another technique to remote view. And so when you're chanting a U, which is very simple, but it's hard to perfect, you basically can go to these spiritual planes and have these talks. But what happened with me in Phoenix when I was doing that Jyoti meditation was, in the middle of it, I'm in this deep state of alpha or whatever I was in, and my brother comes up and he says, dinner's ready, slam. He just opens the door while I'm meditating, slams the door. Well, next thing I know, I'm walking through the kitchen with who I now know as Rebbe Sartorres. But I didn't know Rebbe Sartorres at the time. And he says to me, that's your father, his name's Michael. That's your mother, her name's Nancy. That's your brother, his name's Michael. Everybody pointing out everything. He says, that's the dinner you didn't eat because you've been with me for the last 2 hours. And then I could see through the house all the way to where my body was sitting. He says, that's your body. You've got to go back now. Boom, I was back. I'm like, what the hell just happened to me?
What?
And I didn't know who it was, right? I'm walking through a bookstore in Phoenix, and there's on the cover, there's Rebbe Sartorres, a picture of him that Paul Twitchell had painted. And I asked the book person, I said, who is that person? They said, oh, that's Rebbe Sartorres. I said, I got to get that book and read about it. And then I could go visit Rebbe Sartorres and just have conversations with him by going to this spiritual place, which I didn't know about until that happened. So that's what I'm talking about. I put all these stories are all written in the book that I'll soon publish. My publisher at the time said I shouldn't. This was back in the 80s. So, they said, they go, do you want to be taken seriously? Now we know. I mean, when like Allison's being voted the shaman, like she's the shaman of the year and all that. Now, when people like that are accepting it, back in the 80s, only 5% of the population would even talk to you about meditation.
Yeah.
So our world has really changed and evolved over time.
Thank God, because I was weird my whole life too. It's like finally the world seems to be kind of catching up. I want to remind everyone, because you just dropped so many books, so many different figures. They can go to lukestory.com/BrainTap for the show notes for this episode. My team will do the best to link out to all your books and all these things mentioned. Because I get questions after we publish these, like, what was that thing he said? I'm like, it's in the show notes. Or at least we do our best. I've been into cacao for a couple decades. Now that's cacao, not chocolate. Been into that since I was born, probably. But most chocolate is a pretty sketchy origin and full of sugar and sometimes even mycotoxins. I'm talking about the superfood cacao, the ceremonial grade stuff. The brand I use is from Danette May of Mindful Health and her company Earth Echo. It's called Cacao Bliss, and it is insanely good. Cacao Bliss is made with 100% organic cacao beans that are naturally kissed by the sun, maintaining their miraculous health benefits. Then they blend the cacao with turmeric, MCT oil, coconut, Himalayan sea salt, cinnamon, and black pepper for the perfect mix to add to hot water or any other hot or cold drink. My go-to is usually pouring a scoop or packet of this stuff into my morning coffee. I actually made one this morning and chugged it on the road while running errands. Cacao Bliss does the cacao right. It checks all the boxes. It's paleo, gluten-free, keto, and even vegan. Well, mine's never vegan because I usually add grass-fed butter and colostrum to my hot drinks. But anyway, if you're ready to get down with some Cacao Bliss, it doesn't matter how you make it. It's always delicious and really good for you. It's your lucky day today right now because they are offering up to 15% off when you use the code Luke15 at earthechofoods.com/LukeStory. That's earthechofoods.com/LukeStory. Or you can just click on the link in your podcast app show notes. You'll see the code Luke15 there too. How does hypnosis come into your journey and how does that relate to BrainTap? Because often when I'm listening to the BrainTap tracks, and since you've been in town, I'm like, I got to get back on that. Even though I don't have the full headset with the lights right now. Josh said, just listen to the tracks, when you're working. So sometimes I'll work and just put on the alpha wave tracks. Sometimes in the morning I'll do the different manifestations. But the ones that are your voice seem to definitely have an element of hypnosis to them. And often there's a dual voice where, there's the main track. And then over here in the right ear, you're like, and you don't need to worry about remembering any of this. It's getting it. It's really cool.
Right. I
love them. So I don't even know this to be true, but is hypnosis part of this? Because it's been something I've experimented with and had some benefits.
Like Richard Bandler says, everything is hypnosis or nothing is hypnosis. So even down to the clothes we put on today, we thought, how am I going to show up today? We have this ideal, right? And we dress it's like Halloween every morning. We dress up, and I remember going to a Halloween party. They said, what are you going as? I'm going as a hypnotist, because I had my office clothes on, right? And hypnosis plays a big role but it's not the hypnosis people think about. People think of hypnosis like the stage shows, and I've done a lot of those. I mean, that's what I did with Gilly. I was his warm-up act in Vegas, where but mine was called the Mystical Mind Tour. I did all spiritual things during my stage show. People that didn't think they were psychic were giving readings, and we would have people see into their wallets and all sorts of bizarre, and everybody could do it.
So you weren't having someone act like a monkey or,
No.
I remember on a cruise ship, there was a hypnosis show and it seemed real, but he would have someone come up on stage and do something ridiculous and then pull them out of it. And they were like, what? I didn't do that.
My dad studied hypnosis. I have too. My franchise used a lot of hypnosis and NLP as we learned it. And it's powerful. But the problem with hypnosis is you have to believe. You have to suspend somebody's disbelief in order to get them to believe what you're saying. And the problem is you can't get everybody into that state because they're critical mind. Now, I believe everyone can benefit from hypnosis, no question. And it's a powerful technology. But the problem is that people, they get in the way of it working. But the language patterns, I studied with Ericksonian hypnosis first. I had an office in Scottsdale, remember? So Milton Erickson was right there. So Jeffrey Zeigen, those folks. So if I always figured, my dad was really big at this. He said, everybody talks about the expense of an education, but nobody talks about the cost of ignorance. So he told me, he said, and I still take training. I mean, even this weekend, we learned a lot, right? I mean, the Modern Nirvana event, if you didn't go, you missed it. You know, it was incredible. And like what Deepak dropped on us, I mean, that was awesome because that's like a whole different story than I've heard him tell before. And it was really cool. And so you have to have that child mind. And so hypnosis was really good. But when I got into NLP, you can use the language patterns, but they gave it formation, let's say, because now it was structured. Like the only reason I could have a franchise was I could record the bass, like I could record the bass drum. And then my therapist could do the interaction, like the coaches. Now they call them coaches. Back then, that wasn't a word that, you know, back in that time when you thought about coaches, thought about football and that. But hypnosis plays a big role because of language. We need to get people to relax and slow down and accept the messages. So when people listen to it, they'll hear that dual voice you're talking about. Those are really, I think of affirmations are good, but when you think of an affirmation, it's like something told to you. But what if you could say, instead of saying, I am rich, that's an affirmation, right? What if you heard, what if you were rich? What would you see, hear, and experience? That's a whole different thing for your brain because the brain then can act on that. So if we can get those neurons wiring and firing around that concept, now unseen forces go to work for you, proving you right. The other is just, somebody says, I'm rich. And then they go, oh, but I'm not rich. I have credit card debt and I'm not able to maybe go out to a dinner outside of the home. You understand? All that self-doubt. But it's all about what, where, when, how. We don't have to worry about the why. Most people get too involved with why they're doing something or, you know, why they're in trouble. Like you say, well, what's happening? Why aren't you successful? Then they start telling you all the excuses. But what if you were successful? What would you do? What would you do today? What if you were just put on the planet right now, right this very moment, and we predicted for you your past and we predicted for you a future, but you get to change it because this is a new day. There's never been a day like today. There's never been an experience like now. So part of what we do is we have to dehypnotize. In fact, we're here at the ranch, right? The Music Hill Ranch, and Rod Hairston, who's an expert at NLP and things like that, he probably said it best. He said, you know, what happens with people is they have all this uncertainty, right? And this uncertainty causes them to seek out certainty. But what they really find is inadequacy. But then they don't want to do the activation. So a lot of times with hypnosis, people would come and say, I want this change. I want to be a non-smoker. No, you don't. You want to have a lifestyle that is tobacco-free. You don't want to be a non-smoker. You want the same results that you get from the cigarette from something else. If you don't find it, you're going to keep smoking because that's your best choice right now. We always make the number one best choice. Not the best choice for us, but the best choice at that moment, given all the parameters that are there. We can go back in time and make all the changes, right? If we had the looking glass, like, you know, we could say, wow, go back. So what we believe is you're already in the future. You've already done this. We know that because we have the world's greatest biocomputer, 100 billion neural bit processor, and each one of those neurons is more powerful than a Cray computer. So imagine the predictability our brain has. And when Deepak Chopra says 97% of what you're going to do tomorrow we know about today, what are you pretending not to know? So when people get up and they have the same, you know, the old bumper sticker that said SSDD, same shit, different day, you know, it's like you created the shit, change it, change something, you know. And so with hypnosis, we found that was a good start. NLP was an even better start. So in my book, I have a book called Discover the Language of the Mind for those that really want to learn how we put it together. And what I did differently than other therapists is I didn't go out to train a bunch of therapists. In fact, most of the people that took NLP training with me, they wanted to be Tony Robbins, right? And I think he's great, but there's only one Tony Robbins. I don't care how much you train, how much you do. He's got his genius. You got to find your genius. So what I decided was I'm going to go out to the masses. I don't want to go to, of course, I trained a lot of people over the years, and I'm involved with Quantum University where they take my training online. But the reality is that I want to help people find their own genius. Because if I do that, That's something I can live with. I can help millions and thousands of people instead of just one person. And so the technology is something that we need to teach them something that will keep teaching them. So I call them the thoughts that keep on thinking. That's the voice that goes back. So now when they're listening, somebody goes, "What voice should I listen to?" Neither. Because we're not talking to you anyway. The you that shows up to listen to it has to call on the real you to listen. Because if you could make the change, you already did it. I always tell people, your best thinking brought you here, but your best thinking isn't going to get you out of here. We need to upgrade your thinking, right? So that's where the dual voice comes in. So think about it when you're sitting in a room, like if you went out to a restaurant recently and you're sitting there talking and there's millions of noises going on around you, right? Your ears are taking in 25,000 pieces of information. What are you really listening to? Mostly what you're looking at, because that's the way our primitive brain works. But we're hearing 25,000 pieces, but we're only acting on 40 of them. What are we missing in reality? We're not even seeing 1 to 2% of reality. As beautiful as that sunrise and sunset is, we're only seeing 1 or 2% of reality. They say that what Jesus saw 2,000 years ago is different than what we see because there's more light available to us. There's more colors. The color spectrum's different. There's new colors coming all the time, and neuroscience is now proving that. So we're actually opening up our perceptual filters. And of course, you can do that through psilocybin and other plant-based medicines that help us to open up those filters. We're just seeing what's already there. It's just right there. Just like I was talking about seeing auras and seeing your guides and things. They're here right now. They're with us. And they're probably laughing, going, "Oh, you found out." So.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah, I've had the sense in deep meditative experiences or plant medicine or psychedelic experiences that this narrow bandwidth of our awareness is just that, right? And that I don't know, it's almost like a trick of our evolution, that in order to just have the proprioception that we have, that we're limited by our senses, and that the bodies are sort of this tuning fork or projector that create a reality for us. Right. And if we get tricked thinking that that's the only reality, then we tend to live in those lower states of survival, and life can be much less than fun. There's a lot of suffering in that limitation. What's very interesting about it to me is that oftentimes really intellectually adept people are the thickest headed when it comes to the acknowledgement of the vast spectrum of reality that is actually present that we're talking about today, right? It's the narrow-minded skeptic, intellectual, academic that thinks that all there is what we can perceive with our senses. And I always want to just send them off to an ayahuasca retreat.
Right, right.
There's so much more there.
When you start believing your own crap, that it's the only thing, the real thing, this is it, you've already lost. There's only an infinite number of possibilities from any one moment in time. And you're only living out one of them. There's an infinite number of others. So that's kind of happening in reality right now, right? Religion, we only see things through that. And Deepak, I think his example he gave about the cats, because they watched some of your followers watched the Instagram live, but he was talking about how the cats that were brought up in the horizontal reality couldn't see vertical, and the cats that were brought up in the vertical reality couldn't see horizontal. Well, that's true for us. We're brought up in this reality to see things the way they are right now, what's happening in this world. What are we not seeing? Because we believe. Some people want to hold on to their belief system so fully. And of course, when you believe something, certainty comes from when you convince somebody else to believe what you believe. And then you believe somebody else, and you think, oh, we have this consensus. 6 of my best friends believe this is the way it is. So this is the way it is. No, it's the way it is for you, but it's not the way it is for everyone. And like I was saying, I was brought up Catholic, so that's the way it is. I didn't know there was anything else. What are you talking about? That's just crazy talk. You mean people can manifest things out of thin air like Sai Baba? And I was lucky. I went to see Sai Baba many times and got to sit right there in the front row, touch his feet, get the vibhuti ash. Well, how does that happen?
Yeah, I went there once shortly before he died, and he was quite a bit older, so he kind of wheeled this little buggy out. They took the buggy through darshan, but I wasn't close enough to see him. I don't even know if he did manifest anything, but I do have relatives that, like you, were just sitting right there, watched his hand be empty and watched a ring appear.
My wife was so upset. I said, Cynthia, just relax. She'd never got you had to pick chits to get into the front row.
Right.
I was there for 11 days and got 10 days on the front row.
Really?
Right there.
What?
Saw him doing everything. You hear him, and he'd come up to me almost every day, and I got to feel the energy. But the most amazing, one of the trips that we went there several times, but it's raining. It's a torrential downpour, like what do they call it, monsoon happening. He has to walk from his 2-bedroom apartment over to the darshan hall, right? And as he comes out, they're scrambling. They're trying to get umbrellas, and he waves them off. The rain stopped. He walks into under the roof of the darshan hall, does his thing, talks to everybody. When he's leaving again, they're scrambling, getting the umbrella. He waves them off. It stops raining. He walks this thing and they separate the men and the women, right? So I'm over here. I don't know where Cynthia is. And so we meet up afterwards, and the rain was so bad, all of the sandals got washed like almost a quarter mile.
Like all the sandals outside.
Yes. It's like we had to go. You're like looking through this mud pile. Finally, I said to her, "Let's just go buy new sandals. They're only like $3 over there or something like that." Yeah. And I said, "Did you see that?" She goes, "Did you see that? The rain stopped when he walked." And it's like, what is going on here? It's like, here's somebody who can change physical reality. Now, if I told that to some of my aunts and uncles that are still, super. And they're just so myopic. It's like, I remember her father and mother, because we were going over there, and go, "What do you go over there for?" And we told them, well, we go over there because this is a guy that tells you not to give him money, spend it in your own community. The best thing you can do is go home and be the best person you are. Don't change your religion. Just be the best you can in that religion. He's not trying to create a following, but what did he do? He created billions of people following him. But but he made it very clear, and they go, "Oh, I just can't believe it." I go, "So let me understand this. There could be somebody like that 2,000 years ago." "Oh, yeah, that's right. But not today." "That's right." I'm going,
one time deal.
Yes.
God gives you one shot.
But then when you research Indian philosophy, right, and in the history of the Hindu religion, this has happened many times. It's not a one and done thing,
Yeah.
So,
I think that's why I've been so fascinated and enamored my whole life with the Indian mystics and sages and such. There's so many characters throughout history, and I've been fortunate enough to be in the physical presence of a couple of them, and I really think it had a huge impact on my life. I mean, energetically and otherwise through the teachings. There's something else you mentioned earlier, the chanting. I know chanting for me has been a huge part of my awakening and healing in the Kundalini yoga tradition. And we were chatting the other day, and I'm like, what has Patrick not done? It's like everything I've ever heard of or done, you've done also, and probably more. And first, what was how did you come to find Kundalini yoga, and what was your experience of that?
Well, I went to learn Kriya yoga from Paramahansa Yogananda, which was really good. And I love their chanting. Right, you go to the temple there in Phoenix on Central, and you could go there and sit in the chanting. And somebody said, if you like the chanting here, you should go down to Yogi Bhajan's ashram down on 7th Street. And I said, that's pretty cool. I went down there, and they said, and I was vegetarian, so they said, if you come at night for $5, you can do yoga and have a meal. So I'm single. I'm thinking, I don't have to cook. This is great. So I started doing and I was really physically a lot more fit, which I'm committed to do. I've already lost 35 pounds since COVID. So I'm committed to get back into the shape that I was in before, because you get lazy when you're traveling and make excuses. So I decided I better start stepping up and doing that. And so I started going there in the evening, and they said, you can go for free if you come at 3:30 in the morning. So I started going twice a day. Then I started having these experiences, because in the morning it's even better because the temple doors open up to the sun. And in Phoenix, you're always going to get a sunrise pretty much, every day. So you do this 2 hours of Kundalini yoga with these Sikhs that are there. They wouldn't talk to me because I wasn't a Sikh, but you could get your little sheep rug out, do your yoga, and then at the end, they would do the meditation to the sunrise. And I started having these out-of-body experiences, like better than anything I've ever done, and I started training my body that I could just do a few of the breath of fire, and I could get right into it. So that's one of my favorites. We just actually had a published article from from Ames Bhopal that I'm listed on with PubMed. We did a research program where we showed how pranayama using Kriya Yoga, how it affects the brain and balances the hemispheres.
Oh, cool.
It wasn't with BrainTap, but we used our equipment, our HRV equipment to test it. And we've had 2 actually breathwork published in PubMed this spring about breathing, about breathwork.
Are those links findable? I mean, if my team can find them, oh, cool. That's interesting. I think there's one thing I really dig about all of this emerging science is that, as you said earlier, now there are ways to quantify spiritual practices and brain entrainment and the different technologies. We can actually see what it's doing now. It's rather than it just being limited to the subjective experiencer's, anecdotal account of it, right? I mean, I love doing something and I put on my Aura ring and I'll start a little session and I'll check my HRV. By the way, I found an interesting thing. I don't know what my brain waves are doing, but in one ayahuasca ceremony, I start right before I drank it. I started my Aura ring HRV, and my HRV tanked for the entire time. I was like, "Oh, that must be pretty stressful on your nervous system." Yeah. I can see why the integration.
We only learn in environments of stress, right? If people go, "I want to learn and grow, but I want to stay in my comfort zone," that doesn't happen. You don't go to the gym and not work out your muscles. So we have spiritual muscles, we have, neurology, we need to exercise our nervous system. And these are only things that it's kind of like the phone. The phone is the vehicle. You're talking to the person on the other end. So somehow through quantum physics, right, we get to hear that. So, but we have to get our body in shape to do that. So mentally we have to prepare ourselves, and it's uncomfortable. Like PMF. I love PMF. I do it every morning. In fact, I travel with one because in the morning, that's part of my morning deal is to energize my body.
Yeah, same.
But if you do an HRV after PMF, a real, I'm not talking about like, there's other ones that are low wattage or whatever they call it with PMF, but the one that I hear you got the thumping, that's going to tear up your nervous system for a little bit. It's an exercise for the nervous system. But most people, when you hear about Fred down the street that dies of a heart attack, and you go, Fred never got angry. He was such a nice guy. Why did he die of a heart attack? Because he never got angry, because he never stressed out his nervous system. We can't underperform either. The body will atrophy. So we need to do, that's why it's so important to stress out the body, then relax the body. The piece that most people miss is to relax the body. Like if you go onto our site, Sporting Kansas City, actually we have a picture of their workout facility. They put in a 20-station brain tapping room after the professional soccer team works out, because they found they could reclaim 80% of the energy they had before the workout.
Wow, so cool. So I love to do that too, actually. If I do a really hard workout, I'll do a brain tap and just 15, 20 minutes, because I'm just smoked if I do it right. If I do like
you've used
yesterday,
up that ATP reserve, right? Yeah. So how do we get that? Of course, we can eat food. That'll take 4 hours. We can drink water, or we can do breath work, which is instantaneous, or we can do a brain tap and get light. You can go outside and just sit in the sun too, if we didn't have all the atmospheric problems that we have, right? Used to be you could just
people blocking the sun.
Yes,
remain. Yeah. I talk about that stuff on the show. I always drop the word chemtrails. Right. And people think it's not real. I'm like, have you ever walked outside and looked at the sky? Like, I don't know. You're older than I am, right? I'm 50. When I was a kid, you'd lay on the lawn and you'd see a plane go by, and there would be a condensation trail behind it, and you go, oh, it's just kind of hypnotic actually to just sit there and watch it, and it would dissipate. And then somewhere in the 90s, I started seeing in LA just tic-tac-toe patterns, just these huge plumes of whatever it is going across, and it would stay all day. And next thing you know, you have a sunny day that was overcast. It's criminal. And I always like to say, for the people that are, environmentalists, God bless you, but why are you not paying attention to this?
Right.
Okay.
They're dropping aluminum into our brains from the sky.
Yeah,
if you want to dumb down a society, that's one of the ways they did it in Germany. So they took that technology now global.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
I digress. I want to keep it positive, but sometimes I like to drop those in. So let's, in the last few minutes we have, Patrick, let's talk about what BrainTap is actually doing. When you put on these, actually, let me see that device. So for people watching the video here on I have another pair of headphones on, but you can see this really sort of space age looking thing. And I know people, when I wear this on social media, they're like, what the hell is that? But on the inside, there are these LED lights, And then inside the actual headphones, I don't want to break them, but inside there are lights that are hitting your ears. And then, of course, there's all these different tracks that you listen to in the app. Sometimes it'll say alpha and it just goes like wah, 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 or, delta, theta, all the different brain waves. Gamma, you just told me. So I didn't even know that was in the app. So now I'm obsessed with the gamma ones. But
so I'll explain it.
Yeah, kind of just break down,
So we started with just retinal flashing. Actually, now the books about neurophysiology and photobiomodulation now show that if you want to boost mood, retinal flashing has now been proven to boost mood. We have studies ourselves that have done that, but now other people have discovered that too. Your eyes are closed when you're using this. So we're just looking at photic energy. It's a 470 nanometer light. So some people don't use it at night. About 20 to 25% of the people can't because it'll drive too much energy into the system. Your eyes aren't just attached to your brain. Your eyes are your brain. So it's brain matter. So when you tell somebody you got beautiful eyes, you're really saying, hey man, you got a beautiful brain, because that's what you're looking at. But there are some people that can convert energy through their eyes.
There's a lot of hype about CBD these days. I feel like everywhere I turn, I see an endless sea of CBD products. There's dog treats, sodas, and just about anything edible that companies can slap a CBD label on. Now, there's no doubt that CBD has many benefits. It's been proven to reduce inflammation, help muscle recovery, relieve anxiety, reduce stress, and improve sleep. The thing is, it's not whether or not something contains CBD. It's all about the sourcing of the product and whether or not it actually works. This is why my CBD of choice is Eaton Hemp. Their CBD is minimally processed and infused with Eaton's own organic hemp seed oil grown on their farm in upstate New York, making it a whole plant, unfiltered, and full spectrum product. This ensures that you're getting the maximum terpenes and the full entourage effect as the nutrients in the plant work in synergy together. It's also 100% organic, and this is an incredibly important fact, as much of the hemp on the market contains heavy metals, pesticides, and other brutal toxins. This is, of course, less than ideal when you're trying to take a product for its health benefits. So if you're ready to get your chill on with some clean, super legit CBD products, go to eatonhemp.com and use the code Luke for 20% off. That's EATONHEMP, eatonhemp.com, and the code again is Luke. What about the blue light? If you're at the spectrum of 470, I've wondered this, and I've used mine at night a few times, but I'm such a blue light, control freak that I often get nervous about using it because I'm like, I don't know, even though my eyes are closed, am I going to
We have so many sleep
shut down
studies.
melatonin?
We have so many sleep studies that show we've improved coal miners' sleep by 80% by using blue light at night when they sleep.
Really?
So blue light, we're not giving you enough blue light. This is only 8 LEDs. When you look at your computer screen, it's 1,208 times 470. You're talking about thousands of LED lights.
Okay.
This is just a very small dose. So your eyes are, you can listen.
So it's not like walking into a room with fluorescent lights all over the ceiling and getting blasted with that really weird.
And we're really only looking at, this is so little amount of energy of blue light but for some people, like I said, 20, 25 people, they'll just listen to the earphones, not the blue light. So if you're somebody that anything stimulates you, like my wife can't use it at night, she loves it during the day and the afternoon, but if she does it at night, it's too much energy because she has blue eyes. Blue-eyed people will take in more energy through the eyes. Brown-eyed people won't, because those are designed genetically to live in areas of the world where we have a lot more light.
Interesting.
So all those things happening. But why we use light? I work with the Neuro Ophthalmology Research Association, and your eyes actually control 30% of your hearing. Most people don't know that. So if you've ever been to a lecture and you couldn't hear the lecture, but then you adjusted your vision, now you could see them, you could hear them. That's because, remember, all those things happening, your brain has to, when you're walking through the forest, you only want to know what you're about to step on. You don't need to know everything else. So it kind of directs your awareness. But we also know that hearing only engages about 70% of the neural networks in the brain. When we introduce light, we've now got 100% of your brain network. Not that you're using 100% of your brain's potential, but the network is activated. It comes online, and then we're gonna actually invite cranial nerve 2 to. What happens is our default mode network, or some people call it the reticular activating system. It goes, what the hell's going on out there? because it's always looking around our environment. Is this safe? Is this okay? Is there danger? It now knows, hey, it's a little weird, but here, okay, we're going to follow it. So if you and I were on my spaceship coming toward Earth, what we talked about, and we looked at Earth, we would say, when we had a frequency generator and it was measuring the Earth, it would go from 0.01 to 100. If we were by a volcano erupting, it'd be about 100. If we're by the ocean, it'd be about 10. If we're sitting on the mountain, it'd be 7.8. That's the Schumann frequency we hear about. So we're designed, water is 10 hertz frequency. We're designed like a hummingbird to be near the water. So what do? We love being by the water because it activates a part of our brain. So we seek that. We seek mountaintop experiences because it creates GABA. It doesn't. It tells our brain to tell our gut to create the GABA, right? So all these things are happening. So the blue light is actually being used to engage the frontal cortex. What we want to do is bring energy to that area of the brain so that you don't fall asleep.
Ah, okay.
And then
so while you're using it.
Yes. Yeah. So light is converted through the hemoglobin, it absorbs the charge, circulates through the body, just like any light. Any light is going to do this. We're just using tuned light.
And there's red lights in there too.
So reason we have light in the ears is some of our doctors were using lasers, and there's auricular points, right? Dr. Noger said there's different auricular points. You could use needles, you can use lasers, you can use seeds, and everything, like I was talking about iridology, is also iridology. The ear does it, the feet do it, the palms do it. Our body is replicated or duplicated to get to those. So what we found was, how could we use photobiomodulation? What's the best method? Well, there's a lot of great ones. This isn't the only one, but what we want to know is in the ears, we have a very special place because the ears, the blood through the body goes through the ears. It takes 3 to 4 minutes. Everywhere else in the body, it takes 45 seconds. So when you put a light pad on your body, unless you have the big wall ones that we saw at the event, which are good. I mean, we have beds that you lay in that have 12,000 of them. That's really energizing. So, but your body is going to accept those. It's going to circulate through the brain. Now, we want into the brain because the ears control the temperature of the brain. So that's why when you wear a hat, the blood is warmer, your brain stays the right temperature. But that's going to be regulated through blood flow through the ears. That's part of what the ears do. So I thought, wow, what if we could use photobiomodulation there? They're already wearing the headset. So we did this with autistic children because they can't hear instructions the way that we do. And Joe Quita Handy, who you met, she helped me with the little experiment. I said, put this on the kids. These lights look solid. They're not. 197 times per second, they're pulsing. Oh, wow. And our brain actually knows that. Just like in the movie where Dustin Hoffman, they dropped the toothpicks on the ground. He says 1,124 or whatever. He counted them. Our brain does the same thing. The reason that computer screens are so damaging to us is not just the light. It's our brain is trying to figure out the patterns all the time. So it's actually doing a mathematical equation every time that screen refreshes. And now the screens are refreshing even faster. And
is that because of the flicker rate?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So they're using the technology that we're using here in a safe way. They're doing it, it could be safe, but.
So you're programming a deliberate flicker rate to induce different states and with a different goal than just something that's poorly designed. Like these lights, they call them keynote flow lights, and they're fluorescent bulbs, and they're designed to not flicker because they're used for filming, right? Exactly. And if they flickered, if you were in slow motion, it would go wop, 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 wop.
Yeah. So these are flickering. Like when we used to have a light bed that we designed before light beds were really popular, but they were too expensive. They were costing us $35,000 to $40,000 to make. And so we just kept one of them. And but when we tried to get a picture of them all the time, but because we could program them they're not just light. A lot of people just use, this is 630 nanometer light. This is 810 nanometer light. Well, that's just one thing you can do with light. You can actually have it flicker at a frequency because there's not just light sound, there's vibration. Because everything in this universe, remember, we're looking at the particles vibrating and we give it shape and meaning. So we can also do that with light. We can give it information. And like solfeggio frequencies, we can give it information for harmony, for love, for peace, like a digital drug. And right now, this headset the Brazilian government actually invested their own money, $250,000, to prove that BrainTap's a digital drug because we can show we upregulate 54 different neurotransmitters.
Wow.
So, but when the study's over, it's about halfway through the program. It's working great. They're doing blood serum draws. I actually have on my phone, they sent me the picture of when they're doing the draws, and they said everything's working great, just like we thought it would. And so with it. That's called Anvisa in Brazil instead of the FDA, because the government wants to give everybody a brain tap when they have mental disorders, because most of the drugs, unfortunately, and if you're taking the drugs, don't stop because I say this. Just know, go to your doctor and get off them, but they don't work. The problem is you can't get off them. They're meant for short-term use to train the brain to, just like a psilocybin. That's why you have to do the microdosing. But what they do is they found out when you get on those drugs, they say these aren't addictive. But then 3 years later, when you try to get off them, you might as well be on heroin.
Yeah, I found that to be the case.
Yeah,
definitely.
But we have our own pharmacy. We're only 6 inches away from the world's greatest pharmacy in the world. It's between our ears. It can dispense any number of 25,000 neurochemicals with a thought, but it also with an experience. So we can do ayahuasca, we can do light therapy, we can do all these neurohacking drugs, or not drugs, they're not drugs, but they're, what do they call adaptogens?
The nootropics.
Yeah, nootropics. They're basically reacting to our own brain's receptor sites. So the reason we can do things like painless surgery, like I had painless surgery with my shoulder, my dad taught me through hypnosis how to have it without any anesthetic. They cut my shoulder open, they took a piece of my collarbone, put it over here, put a screw through it, no anesthetic.
Are you serious?
No, yeah, because
oh my God,
pain is optional here. If you want to have pain, go for it. Just increase your stress, your anxiety, and your fear, you'll have a lot of pain. But if you can get into the zone, you can get into that 10 hertz frequency, between 10 and 10 hertz frequency and 7.8 hertz frequency, your brain will create its own analgesia.
Wow.
And you'll be pain-free.
I heard David Hawkins talking about that. He had a number of surgeries and didn't use any anesthesia.
Yeah.
And I had to believe he was in integrity in telling the story, but he described it in a similar way.
Yeah, I remember a person who worked for us got in a really bad burn accident all over their whole body. And they have to do this scraping to get the burns off. And he couldn't do it. I said, Paul, I'm gonna hypnotize you. And all you have to do is use this keyword. The word is white. And if somebody has the BrainTap, the similar series is in there called Pain Free. It's in the Power User. I put it in there. It's a 13-session training to teach you how to activate your own.
I've seen that in there. Yeah. That's cool.
So he used that, and they couldn't believe it. He would sit there with a smile on his face while they were scraping his body with steel wool. Because you're not your body. You can step out of it for a little bit and let them work on your body, just like you'd leave your car at the dealership. Go have a coffee across the street, come back with this done, get in your car and drive away. So don't identify with this body. I love when Sai Baba actually said that. They said, Sai Baba, why don't you just live forever? He said, why don't you wear that shirt forever? I said, what do you mean? He said, this is just a shirt to me. Why would I want to wear the same shirt every day? And so people they start identifying with this body and think that's who they are. Now we need to tune up this body because this is where we live while we're here. Just like our car, if you get the oils changed, you change the tires, you keep it maintenance, that car will give you year after year of dependable service. But if you don't, you're going to have a breakdown. That's what brings them to whatever method of help. I used to jokingly tell people we're a gateway drug to the self-help industry, because people only come when they're struggling. When this is for anybody who wants to optimize their brain. I mean, we have studies. One of my favorite recent studies, so people understand it's not just for pain or whatever. Julia Arndt, who's a high performance coach with Google, we took some high performing Google execs, and Google measures everything, even keystrokes. So they know how to measure your efficiency. And she knows how to get the most out of them. So I said, what if we made a whole series based on your theories with BrainTap? We did the exercise, 19% improvement in efficiency.
Wow.
So now everybody who does her training does it with BrainTap, because you can learn it on the conscious level, but how do we deliver it to the subconscious? Because that's what's running the show. Only 5% of your world is controlled by your conscious mind. And Richard Bandler says that everybody's running around and they're chained to the back of the bus and Freddy Krueger's driving. We need to kick Freddy Krueger off, take the handcuffs off and drive our own bus. That's the whole deal. But the subconscious, we have to train the subconscious, right? It's a great servant, but a terrible master. So we need to work with that. And that's where the hypnosis, NLP, the affirmations. Now, the other thing, if people are saying, I don't want to have anybody in my head, they're already in your head. The thing is that your words, what you say to yourself, what you think about yourself, we now know can upregulate or downregulate 2,300 gene expressions. So who are you? You're a bundle of thoughts, and you're not this. You are something greater than this. And every once in a while we get a glimpse of it. But if we get this body in the right place, we get in the right mindset, think of your brain like a transmitter and a receiver, because that's what it is. There's little hair follicles on the brain that they now know transmit and receive information. We have little antenna that get this information. So, like I think somebody this weekend actually said it really well. They said, you don't even know your next thought. So how can you control your life? We're here for the experience. Don't try to control it. Just be involved in it, set out the right motion, and the subconscious will take care of it. But you got to do the training. If you go on a vacation without any plans, you might not get a hotel, you might not get a rental car, you might not see the things you are. So take the time to plan out that vacation. And for us, that vacation happens in 24-hour segments. So figure out how you're going to, choose your adventure as it were every day. That's the key.
Going back to the frequencies of light, in the app, I don't know how many, you have dozens of different programs for different goals and outcomes. Does the frequency of the lights change based on what's in your ears?
Yes. Here's what happens. Every session, 1,300 or more now, and I'm adding more all the time.
Oh my God, there's that many?
We have Allison's on there for those that,
that's
so if you
right.
want to do some shaman journeys, we just got those on there, and those are awesome. So it's not just me. So if somebody's wondering, we have 60 other, and we're looking for more. So if you have something you think we could use at BrainTap and they're professionally done, then we can encode them to work on the BrainTap network. But every one is different. There's not one session that's the same, because if we do the same, the brain will learn the pattern. And as soon as the brain learns the pattern, it says that's wallpaper. It'll be one of those other 25,000 pieces of information. That's why when people go, oh, I listen to binaurals on YouTube, I go, good luck with that, because I know in the lab, if you listen to it 3 times in a row, the 4th time it's not doing it. Your brain goes, oh, I know that. I got that story down. What's the next story? It's always looking for the next challenge. It says, oh, that's safe. I don't need to worry about that. And we're really training that limbic brain, not the conscious mind. We're training the brain that controls the show, not the.
So with BrainTap, like there's certain favorites that I have. There's just the alpha, there's maybe 8 different alpha ones on there that are just the sounds. I like to listen to those when I work. There's some of the guided ones about manifestation, wealth, business.
As long as you listen to something in between.
Okay.
Like if you pick out 10 or 15 that were different, rotate them.
Okay.
Don't listen to what I'm saying is don't go like today. If I like, let's say you want to bust loose from the money game, which is one.
Yeah, I love that one.
So you listen to that, you go, wow, I really want to do that. So you listen to that every day. That's not the same. So you should then mix that up with the 17 sessions we have for Think and Grow Rich, or the other ones we have in the Wake Up audio series, which are my favorite business books. If you want to integrate those business principles, listen to those at the subconscious level, then they show up in your life in ways you can't imagine, because the subconscious knows how to make them work for you.
So you just got to mix them up so your brain doesn't get that pattern recognition thing. Oh, you just reminded me of something. You have the teachings, one of the books of Stuart Wilde in there.
Yes.
I rarely ever meet anyone that knows who he was. And a couple of his, back when I used to, I think one of the reasons I have a podcast is I used to buy these big cassette books, of spiritual books, Wayne Dyer, Deepak, Stuart Wilde.
We got him on there too. We have those. So the whole thing was.
But he was cool as hell.
Yep.
And then he got pretty out there later on, went into all the alien stuff, which, hey, whatever. But
well, now the government's into it. They just released all the alien stuff. So here we go.
But there was like a period of Stuart Wilde teaching that really carried me through. Really incredible stuff.
I loved it. I mean, it helped me.
Yeah.
I mean,
he was a great teacher.
I used to read a book a day.
Wow.
When I had my radio show for 12 years, I'd have guests on that would send me their books. And they were always surprised that I knew it, because I read it. Like before I came here to meet Rod, I read his book, and then I liked it so much I bought the audio so I could listen to it on the airplane on the way here.
I do that too before interviews. Of course, I didn't read your 9 books because I've heard you talk enough. I'm like, no, I kind of get them enough to carry a conversation. But now we're going to put them in the show notes, and we're going to do that. All right. So we know that with BrainTap, we want to mix it up. We don't want to listen to the same one every day. Could you just, in closing, describe what, for those that don't know, what binaural beats are? I know they've been kind of trendy in the past few years, but as I said, when I'm listening to my BrainTap headphones, I'm just hearing wow, 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 wow. And to someone who's new to it, they'd be like, what the hell is this noise? How does the sound actually work to synchronize your hemispheres or encourage different, brain waves.
So what's happening is, remember, our brain is always trying to match frequencies. So it's used to having only one frequency. Like that's isochronic tones. Like the planet itself is an isochronic tone generator. So it's generating this frequency, and then there's sub-frequencies, but that frequency is there. But if we introduce, let's say, 200 hertz frequency in one ear, 210 hertz frequency in the other, the brain doesn't hear either of those. It hears the phantom sound of 10 hertz.
So the differential between the two? Oh, yes. Interesting.
And then what the brain does is that's the one it syncs to. It says that must be it, because it's getting this conflicting information. It's different. It's not what we usually have in reality. But then what we found is not everybody can hear perfectly. So then we put a layer of isochronic tones in there too. And then to make it even better, we mix in frequencies, because we want to hit different regions of the brain. You might find when you're listening, go, that really hit me here. There's actually a spiritual center in the brain. So in the gamma ones, we made sure we hit that place so you could have those, experiences. Because with even the cheapest earphones, if somebody was to use the app, even with the cheapest earphones, it will work. Back in the 80s, we had to buy special earphones, that would be surround sound kind of earphones. They never had those. I mean, when those come out, that was like magic. Wow, these are cool. But there's the sound. When you have light, sound, and vibration, you make space. So when people are doing the BrainTap, we create a space. Like people will have what we call island time experiences, and what that really is we're disengaging the nervous system. We're having you forget who you are for a while, because if you can forget who you are, you can reorganize into who you want to be. But as long as you hold on, it's like I tell people, it's the same way we capture monkeys in the wild. They go, what do you mean? I said, if I want to capture a monkey that's this tall, I know with the size of their fist, I'm going to find a jar with a potato in it. I'm going to have them reach their hand in. They can't get it out because they're so stupid. They don't let go of the potato. I just reach up behind them, pop and have a hammer. They're in the Chicago Zoo tomorrow. And that's what that potato's their belief system.
I love that analogy. You just reminded me of that. When I checked into rehab when I was 26 years old, I read that or heard that somewhere. And that was, to me, the best metaphor for addiction, right? Yep. And it's like just not being able to let go of that thing. It's like, I knew, why won't my hand just release this thing and I could pull it out, but it just won't do it. It's a great
because your identity is
metaphor.
linked to that. I'm an alcoholic, or I'm this, or I'm that. I'm overweight. I'm a smoker. I'm a whatever. You're none of those things. Get over yourself.
Yeah.
You're an infinite being with infinite possibilities. There's nothing that can prevent you from doing something other than your patience of being there. Sit in the stillness and you'll figure out who you are. But if you're so busy trying to be, you'll never become. So just let it be. The old song, just let it be. And we are, when you look over your journey, hopefully like I have so far, and I'm hopefully going to be here another 60 years, it's like, to me, every day has been exciting. To me, it feels like I'm still a teenager, and there's so much that we're learning and growing and developing. And, the biohacking world's actually put a magnifying glass on it, because now we don't have to go to a doctor. We don't have to go to somebody in a white coat to tell us if we feel good or not. We can do that for ourselves.
Is there any risk or danger in terms of like binaural beats or any of these technologies being invasive? Is there any danger to kind of pushing your brain one way or another over just allowing it to naturally go where it wants to go? It's not like magnetic resonant therapy where you're going to get knocked out, maybe throw up, vomit, and it's not a destructive force. It's an inclusive force. So this is just a gentle way to train the brain. And the nice thing is that we've shown it actually does train the brain. We just did an experiment in Newbern. It's now being done in Brazil. We took a 45-minute session, 5 minutes of BrainTap, HRV. Our HRV can do prolonged studies, so we can hit every minute to see where the brain's at. And then we did 5 minutes with music. What we found was that really did get the parasympathetics going. But then right afterwards, it went right back to their stress state. But when we took that same music with our encoding, they went down a little bit deeper. It didn't totally go back for 72 hours. That's the halo effect. So we proved that with a small group of 15 people. Now we're proving it with a group of 150 people, students at a university in Brazil, because we want to show that it's not, some people go, well, I can do this with music. You can get the experience with music, but you can't get the training with music. Got it.
So we want to train the brain. We want the brain. We always say, don't just meditate, evolve. We can evolve our brains. We can get it working more. It's just we've been locked into this belief that our brain learns a certain way, just like the educational system is from the 1800s. They haven't evolved. But at Quantum University, when you go there, you're going to get a brain tap when you join, because we know that we can teach you much faster and easier if you're relaxed than if you're stressed out, worried about if you're going to learn that information.
What about stacking nootropics, microdosing, anything like that? Have you done any research?
Awesome.
I think I just, I'm always taking some kind of nootropic or something. So
that's what David Rosenthal, when he called me about that, I'm thinking this is like the most straight, narrow kind of guy you'd ever believe. But plant medicine's, it's coming alive. People are, I would have never done it and I've not done it in the way that I will do it in the future, but because I'm still trying to figure out what the safest way is for me. I've done some microdosing, and you actually helped us out, I think 2 years ago after you met my social media guy, Andrew. You brought we did some microdosing. Even my wife, who would never do anything like that, I said, just do this, it helps your focus. And she goes, I'll be damned, man. It's like her focus was there. She got more work done, and she would never, it's like she's sweet Polly purebred. There's no way that she's going to do it. But then you met Joquita Handy, who has adaptogens like Adapt and Thrive. When she told me I'm going, Joquita, it's like, but she saw it in the brains of these autistic kids. What happens? This is a natural progression. The universe will always provide what's necessary for us to heal, because think of yourself as an acupuncture needle. Every person on the planet is. We're feeding energy into the planet, and we're taking energy from them. It's a reciprocal thing, like Clint Oper showed in Earthing. So it wants us to live and thrive and be prosperous. It doesn't want us to die. It wants us to be healthy.
Awesome. Man, well, thank you so much, Patrick. Where can people find you, BrainTap, all the things?
Well, on social media at BrainTap Tech, and then or at Dr. Patrick Porter, at Dr. Porter, Dr. Patrick Porter. And then, of course, they can go to, if they want to try out the app, they should go to your link that you're going to provide.
Yeah, I will. I'll put that in the show notes and in the intro and outro, because I'm sure there's something there for them. Last question for you is, who have been 3 teachers? I mean, you've named about 100 of them already, but maybe something else will come. Who have been 3 teachers or teachings that have influenced your life or your work that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I think the first would be Hamid Bey. Even though he wasn't alive, I felt like I was working with him, because the first thing that I ever did that was outside of the world of Catholicism and structured religion, I went to a Coptic seminar. They're the first Catholic church, the Coptics, but they're very different than there's 6 actual Catholic churches. I didn't realize that. There's 6 different ones. Coptics are one, and they do meditation. They do eating healthy. They actually, if you were a Coptic priest, you would eat a certain way your whole life, so that when you died, they could cut you open and see if eating cucumbers every morning would make a difference. And they talk. So they were scientists, and that hit me and said, these people aren't just doing something seat of the pants. They're studying what they're doing. So, and I still carry his book on my phone, because every once in a while, and he has other lectures, so books about his lectures. So I'll get something and then I think Parahansi Gonanda was a big one, because when he talks about lighting the spark of the divine in the hearts of every person, that hit me, because my heart was closed. I mean, I grew up in a family that emotions were not accepted. You couldn't cry. I'm almost crying just thinking about it, because it was such an awakening when I started doing Kriya Yoga and doing the breath work, doing those kind of things. And then, of course, the kundalini was good, but I never really got to know Yogi Bhajan. But that was great. And then I think the third would be Richard Bandler. Even though he was kind of now he's mellowed out. He's kind of cool now. But everybody told me, you don't want to go take training with him. He's evil. I said, only if you let him be. I said, this guy's a genius. And so I wanted to learn how he did things, because he could get people to move in directions. There's a lot of other people. I mean, I could probably name 100. I mean, one thing that my dad was very big on was training. If I read a book by somebody and liked it, I found a way to go train with them. Like Deepak Chopra, I told him when we got to meet with him and talk with him, which was awesome, because the last time I talked with him was in 1989 when he just released his book, Quantum Healing.
Oh, wow.
And he was a big influence too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's so many. I mean, nobody could get where they are without a lot of people helping them. And, when I think back, it's every day, that teacher always shows up, as they say. So I'm always looking for that newest piece of information, that new new knowledge.
I can see that. Yeah, we have a lot in common in that way, a thirst for truth and information. Thank you for sharing so much with us today. This has been incredible. Well worth the wait. It's been a couple of years, man. So I'm glad we got to get together and also just hang out a bunch this weekend and get to know you. It's been really fun. And I appreciate what you're doing in the world very much and very much aligned with your mission. And I love your technology, man. It's awesome. So I'm glad I got to really pick your brain on it.
All right. Well, it's great being here. I mean, we watch your lifestyle podcast, so it's great to be a part of it and be part of the history of it and help train and motivate people. So,
awesome, man. Thanks, Patrick.
all right. Thank you, man.
Well, this conversation was one that I was looking forward to literally for years. I've seen Dr. Porter speak at numerous events and listened to other podcasts on which he's been a featured guest. Dr. Porter is one of those rare humans that possesses equal energies in the heart and brain. So it was a huge gift for me to be able to sit down and have this conversation with him, which, by the way, was recorded at a beautiful property here in Texas called Music Hill Ranch. I'd like to give them a shout out. They were kind enough to lend us the location for this particular recording. And man, I just feel like the luckiest guy in the world. I get to sit down with all of my heroes in the space of health and consciousness expansion. And Dr. Porter's one of those people in the world that's just doing great things. So it brings me great joy to share both his teachings and technologies with you. If you're interested in checking out BrainTap, it's one of my favorite tools. And everyone I know that does it loves it and uses it all the time. And it's a really good kind of easy point of entry for people that are working on brain entrainment. It's affordable, accessible, easy to use, and not too far out and woo-woo for your average person to grasp. So if you want to explore BrainTap, you can go to lukestory.com/BrainTap or just click that link in the show notes for this episode, which you can probably find on your podcast app. As I announced in the intro, which you may have missed if you skipped the intro. I know many people do. I even do that sometimes, admittedly. I just want to get to the meat of the interview. But this announcement is worth repeating. I have launched my blue blocking eyewear brand, Gilded, and you can find that at gildedbylukestory.com. It's making blue light uncool and making your eyewear very cool. Some high fashion, well-designed blue blocking glasses that are not only scientifically effective, but also look normal enough to wear in your day-to-day life. That's gildedbylukestory.com. Okay, on to next week's episode, number 382. It's called Feeling Free, Legal Plant Medicines for the Journey of Life with Jerry Ross. And in that episode, next week, we're going to be discussing Jerry's journey through recovering from alcoholism and how he made all of the seemingly right decisions in life and became financially very successful and powerful to a degree, and found that he could not quite solve the sense of emptiness that he had. So he sobered up, and through the course of doing so, and also due to some of the traveling he was doing to Southeast Asia, he discovered two very safe and legal plant medicines, one of them being kratom and the other kava. And through much research and development, created an incredible plant medicine drink, which is called Feel Free. I usually have one sitting right here on my desk. As a matter of fact, I think there's one in the drawer. I might go have a taste of it as I continue on with my day. But that's a really great pain to purpose story next week. And Jerry's just an incredible human who has, turned suffering and adversity into a great gift and is helping a lot of people. So per usual, I'm thrilled to deliver that episode to you. To make sure you don't miss next week's episode or any episode to follow, make sure to subscribe to this show. On most podcast apps, there's a little button that says subscribe. If you hit that, then every episode of the Lifestylist podcast will be magically downloaded to your device or computer, and you won't miss one. So thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your kind attention. For those of you longtime listeners, thanks for sticking with us over the years. We're in our 7th year now, I think, or approaching 7 years. I think 6.5 point something. What a journey. 381 episodes to this point. And I still love it. So I'm trusting that you do too. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you come back next week.